The video game industry has grown to become one of the largest industries in the world, taking in $99.6 billion as of this year, thanks to the great effort put in by game companies. Oh, and don't forget those cash cow free-to-play mobile games that everyone seems to love. However, the gaming industry is not an easy one to survive in, where exposure is hard to come by in the shadows of juggernauts like EA, and a single poorly selling release can lead to the downfall of an entire company. Unfortunately, that is what we are here to discuss. Companies that were once at the top but have now fallen down and been forced into closure, resulting in the loss of some iconic IPs. In today's list, we will be taking a look at 5 defunct game companies. The only publisher to make this list, THQ was one of the gaming industry's powerhouses when it came to publishing. They were up there with publishers like EA, Ubisoft and Activision. They held the rights to a huge variety of IPs which were beloved by many in its time, their biggest IP most likely being the Saints Row series. THQ was known for releasing a lot of games frequently. They churned out video games like farmers churn out butter. What happened then, you may be asking? Well, they filed for bankruptcy in 2012 after failing to repay a loan to Wells Fargo. In their last-ditch effort to raise the money they needed to avoid bankruptcy, they partnered with Humble Bundle in hopes of getting out of the red. It unfortunately wasn't enough to help them get out of the red, however, so in December of 2012 they filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Neversoft opened its doors in 1994. They had a rocky start because they decided only to develop for the Sony PlayStation and not any other systems. They didn't really hit their stride until they started developing the popular Tony Hawk Pro Skater series in 1999, which starred popular pro skater Tony Hawk. With a big star backing their game, they were destined to succeed. The second big IP that Neversoft took over was the development of the Guitar Hero series, which debuted in 2005, but they gained access to the rights in 2007 from Activision to continue the series. As most of you know though, this did not last as their strongest IP, Guitar Hero, was dying in popularity, which led to Activision having to make a call on whether or not to axe the studio or to merge them with another studio. Activision luckily offered to merge Neversoft with Infinity Ward, the studio behind the Call of Duty series, saving a lot of jobs in the process. The merge took place in 2014, so not that long ago, but it was definitely a shame to see the studio die. Arnold Games started up back in 1982, working on small PC games for systems like the Atari ST and the Amiga. However, they later moved on to a more specialised route, which was 3D graphics. Arnold Games were actually behind one of the biggest tech advancements in graphics, which was 3D graphics on a home console. I am of course speaking of the SNES 3D chip, the Super FX, which enabled Arnold Games to produce the first ever Star Fox game, which really helped show off their technology to its fullest. This also helped influence console designers to start moving in a more 3D direction. So you could say Arnold Games helped shape the game industry as we know it today as well. Why did this outstanding studio shut down then? Well, in 2004 they ran into a financial wall after putting too much money and faith into their latest products, for example Croc Adventures on the Sony PlayStation. They also lost support of their biggest partner Nintendo, who cut them loose at some point during the N64 generation, having realised they were putting way more funding into their products than necessary. With their last game not selling as well and losing their biggest partner, they were forced into liquidation. Lionhead was one of Microsoft's powerhouse game dev studios in the UK. It had a huge selection of strong IPs, for example the Fable series, which was extremely popular, but apparently it was not enough. Lionhead is the most recent studio to shut down on this list, only going under in April of 2016. It took everyone by surprise because at the time of their closure, they were working on their latest title in the Fable series known as Fable Legends. It was meant to be a fresh take on the Fable series, which was to help the company stay afloat. Unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be and never came out due to the studio's sudden closure. The main reason given for shutting down the studio was money issues. This led to a wide selection of other companies offering to buy the studio to keep the studio going. However, Microsoft, being stubborn, didn't want to sell the rights to the Fable series, which left them with the only other option of closing the studio. Pandemic was a strong company for many years, however no one had predicted there was a guillotine dangling over the studio's head. Always hard at work on a range of projects instead of focusing on a single game, which was a very unique stance on game development. Before its closure, they were working on a few projects, most of which were unfortunately cancelled, some examples being a game based on the Dark Knight movie, Mercenaries 3, and Star Wars Battlefront 3. One game they were working on just before closure and managed to get through the final gate was called The Saboteur, which was a brilliant game, but it wasn't 100% finished, just rushed to a state that it could be called a finishable game. Which was a shame because even in an unfinished state, it was one of my favourite open world games of the PS3 game selection. It was such a shame to see the great company go under when they had such strong IPs backing them. The reason for their closure is a little silly too. EA felt they did not like the direction the studio was going and decided to axe it, despite the fact it was one of their most successful studios alongside DICE.